You wake to stone that seems to hold the cold of night like a memory, breath fogging in the air as if the room itself exhales. Outside the curtain of leaded glass, dissolved light leaks pale and slow. The bells from the chapel across the bailey toll, their iron voices rounded and patient, measuring a morning that is both sacred and domestic. There is no steam of a modern kettle, no quick hum of a hearth that obeys a switch. There are only braziers that must be coaxed, rushes to be swept, and hands that know where to put warmth when the world feels thin. It is Christmas Day within these walls, a day where liturgy and appetite meet under garlands of holly and mistletoe, where the scent of cinnamon and clove travels as surely as any antiphon. You will move from the narrow chamber down into kitchens and through the chapel. You will listen to a chant and a joke, watch a boar's head carried like a trophy, and a secret exchanged behind a shield. If you like to travel in time by smell and sound, leave a like and tell me in the comments where you are listening from. I want to know whether your night is as quiet as this stone. Now imagine. You sit up, the pallet springs complaining softly beneath you, and your fingertips meet the wool of a blanket that is kept warmth only by careful rotation. A candle guttering on the small table throws a thinner light. Under the sill, snow clings. Below, a scullion nudges at a brazier, and a voice from the stair says, almost in prayer, that the first pail of water will be boiling before the sun crosses the outbuildings. Records and household books show that households of the lordly sort kept ritual and heat close together on such mornings. The same ledger that counts spices will also note the lights on the altar. Somewhere between that notation and the hearth, you will find something tender and human. Come with me into the castle on this Christmas morning, and if you follow closely, you will find how the holy and the hungry braid the day into something both solemn and warm. The first scramble is humble and precise. Marta opens her eyes to the cold and listens for the cadence of the day. In the chamber next door, a boy snuffles as he rolls his blanket tighter. Below, someone coughs, and the clank of iron can be heard where cleavers rest against stone. You hear the scuff of boots on flagstones, the hiss of water poured into a pot, and the distant, steady murmur of the steward counting names. Marta ties her hair in a quick knot and pads across the floor, her feet finding the line of a worn runner as if by memory. She moves from the private cold of the sleeping room into the corridor where rushes have been strewn. Straw and crushed herbs smell faint, of lavender and stale ale. "Good morning," Tomas whispers at her elbow, a scullion no older than 17, his face still puffy with sleep. "Have you tasted the ale they warmed for the Lord?" Marta shakes her head and replies, "No, and I am not the sort to steal warmth meant for his cup." The exchange is quick, honest, 2 breaths as people test the day's temperature. Outside the great doors, the gate guard, Wulfric, stamps his feet and blows into his gaunt hands. The air is like the inside of a turned-over bowl. Berta, who irons and mends near the kitchens, passes with a bundle of linens tucked under her arm and calls, "Make sure the embers do not choke, Marta. The steward's list will have no patience for a fire that smokes." Marta's hand finds a grit of familiar rope. She answers, "I will tend it, Berta. The master cook will need ash-free for the spits." There, 3 small domestic exchanges that map how a house wakes. A servant's joke, a directive, a promise kept. The servant's routine reveals a dozen named hands. The steward, Aldrich, moves with a ledger tucked into his belt. He hums a muted line and checks the tally of candles. Master cook Rowan, hair singed at the ear, taps a mortar with a stub of bone and says, "Cinnamon first, then clove, ginger last, or the ginger will bite too soon." The jester, Finn, darts past, carrying a length of green garland, and grins at Marta. "Keep for me your best laugh, and I'll trade you a boiled egg." Alice, the laundress, lifts a basket and laughs softly at her own song. Brother Emrys, an acolyte often given to long, quiet hands, kneels and touches the chapel door, then looks up as if counting breath. Gil, the minstrel, tunes a lute he will not need yet. Edda brings milk in a pail and curses the cold that thickens butter. Ansel, the butler, polishes a brass chalice, his movements smooth with habit. Each person named is a small compass point, a distinct rhythm in the greater pulse of the house. A quick anecdote crosses between Tomas and Berta about a piglet that wandered into the Lord's orchard last year, and the story shifts the mood, a laugh, a small reproach, before it is subsumed by the practical. Marta, fetch more rushes and lay them down the hall. The party will march, and our feet will need softer paths. The profusion of names grounds the morning. Aldrich checks the stewards' lists. Rowan organizes the larders. Finn unwraps a joke. Alis smells to test bleach and lye. Brother Emrys counts candles. Gil practices a plaintive opening. Each movement is both personal and social. The chapel doors open, and the sound of the bells that first measured the dawn now bring a focused hush. The chapel itself is narrow, light blown through small stained panes, the air smelling of wax and lingering incense. Rushes are freshened near the altar,
where a chalice waits, polished and patient. Here the scene tightens. You are close enough to hear the rustle of vestments, the faint rasp of a sung line, and the slight creak of a someone as someone genuflects. The priest, tall and worn-faced, begins an antiphon. Brother Emrys leans forward, lips moving, his hands not idle, but folded taut. "Today we give thanks," he intones softly, and the voice becomes a hum that gathers against the stone. Between him and the smallest acolyte, a conversation slips like a private thread. "Do you feel the weight of it?" the acolyte asks in a low voice, his breath visible. "Some mornings, yes," the priest answers, "but weight is how we remember what to hold." The dialogue extends. Will the Lord attend? He will. He likes to be first at the table and last at the prayers when he can. And the master cook? He is the loudest devout we have. The exchange reaches 8 brief turns as 2 attendants talk about the form of devotion and the reality of hunger, each phrase punctuated by a small action. The priest straightens a stole, the acolyte arranges candles, a young woman crossing to light a taper coughs and tucks her sleeve into her mouth. The congregation is a patchwork, some eyes closed, some staring at a sun-slit mote in dust. The chant rises and falls, and in the pauses you can hear boots on the stone, a scraping as a stool shifts, the low rattle of prayer beads. The smell of incense and browned wax is steady. The taste of cold air touches the tongue like a metal. A superstition passes in a whisper down the pews, that if you drop a rush on Christmas morning and it remains whole at night, the cradle will hold fortune. The belief is small and human, and it finds its place among the formal words. After prayers, the ritual hands of the house reappear in the practicalities of feeding both altar and table. The steward Aldrich marks the attendance list with chalk and nods to Ansel, who will see that pews remain neat for visiting notables. In the hall beyond, banners hang with a dusting of frost at their lower edges. Holly and garland gather at the cornices, and mistletoe is stashed as a small, mischievous token for later. The master cook, Rowan, surveys the space for the banqueting trestles, tables that will be set upon simple supports, rushes arranged to give the feet something to soften against stone. He speaks with a conspiratorial voice to Marta, Thomas, and Berta, 8 quick exchanges of instruction and reassurance as they set to prepare. "Marta, the pies need venting," Rowan says, wiping a hand on his apron. "Thomas has a jar," Marta returns. "Be careful with the vents, the juices will spill," Thomas warns, and they laugh because a spilled pie is a crime and a domestic disaster both. They count platters. "How many boars
do we have?" "2 whole beasts," Ansel replies. "And the head?" "1 for display, 1 for cutting." "Carving cloth ready?" "Bjorn will be at the sideboard with his knives." Each exchange brings them nearer to a domestic choreography, the laying of cloths, the polishing of goblets, the placement of rushes to catch crumbs and dirt. In the kitchen, light is different, a close heat that moves and breathes. The brazier is a heart in a low room, the noise of fire like a body breathing. Flames lift and shift under cauldrons, and where smoke fattens, it carries the scent of rendered fat and sweet ale. Rowan wears a double apron, and his hands are reliable instruments. He instructs. Spices go in stages. Cinnamon and clove at the first boil. Then ginger and a handful of pepper to cut the sweetness. Add honey last, or it will darken too much. His tone becomes technical, precise. To roast a boar whole, you must truss it so the shoulders cook evenly. Skewer through the hocks and anchor the spit with a rope of rawhide. Turn slowly over high coals and baste with ale infused with bay. The skin will crisp in the final minutes if you stoke the embers and raise the heat. That paragraph is a small manual, clear, about 300 characters or so. It describes process in measured steps, giving authenticity to the cookery. The cauldron boils with porridge for the scullions, the smell of garlic and fat and honey folding together in a way that makes the mouth remember hunger. In this room, the jester Finn leans against a beam and recites rhymes to Tomas, which make the boy drop a spoon in laughter. The jester's voice is quick and undercuts the kitchen seriousness. The 5 senses here are asked to do heavy work. You see browned edges and steam. You hear the slap of meat against a board. You smell smoke and spice and hot fat. You taste a scrap of salted pork offered quick and secret. You feel the heat at your cheek that burns like benediction. Marta wipes a pan and for a moment closes her eyes to the smell of rosemary and orange peel. The memory of her mother's hands making small fruit cakes rises, and she lets herself an impatient comfort. Names multiply as the day presses forward. There is Lady Isolde, wrapped in a heavy cloak, who inspects the window tapestries and decides which garlands should hang above the dais. Lord Heron, stately but showing a softened edge in his face this morning, clues the steward with a nod that a foreign vassal will be welcomed at the table. Bjorn the carver sharpens his knives and jokes with Edda about a pig he once carved so poorly the Lord quipped he had eaten a boot. The minstrel Gil practices a strain that will be sung with cups, while Ansel calculates the allocation of bread loaves to servants and notables. Across the hall, Brother Emrys and the priest exchange a quick aside about the sermon and whether the words will lean on mercy or on judgment. Brother Emrys says, "Mercy, I suppose. The Lord's heart is softer when the pews are full." The steward relays the order of who sits where. The steward's voice is a public ledger. 8 named persons are in motion at once, and the house breathes like a living instrument. These named characters are not mere ornaments. They enact tasks, tell jokes, correct mistakes, and their small choices shape the mood of the meal. The great hall, long, with banners and high beams, trestles set like a forest of wood and cloth, comes alive in stage light as torch flames and soft daylight mingle. Hides and garlands hang, and the rushes laid down show paths for feet to travel quietly. The head table is set with a chalice, polished until it catches reflection, linen starched, napkins folded with a small sprig of holly. The boar's head is prepared as a showpiece, its skin bronzed, an apple in its mouth, herbs tucked beneath the jaw, carried by Bjorn with a fanfare that is more ritual than spectacle. A musician steps forward, Gil with his lute, and plucks the opening of a song like a herald. The hall smells of roasting meat, heated wax, spilled ale, and minced spices. The senses are crowded and generous. The steward speaks in a low but firm voice to those nearest. When the head comes through, all stand and clap once, then sit. No one may take from the tray until the Lord lifts his goblet. The master cook gives a curt nod and wipes a wet thump of grease away from his sleeve, while Finn the jester bounces and calls out a cheeky rhyme about a boar that got married to a sow. There are many voices in this scene, and the dialogue stretches deep. The Lord thanks his steward, the steward makes a small correction about seating, the master cook barks at a servant who has polished the wrong goblet, the jester interjects with a joke that becomes a song.
The exchanges number more than 10 in quick succession, an orchestra of social talk, each bite of speech adding a layer to the ceremony. At the moment the head of the boar is carried in, a ritual unfolds that has bits of theater and bits of reverence. The herald cries out the name of the dish, and someone nearby recites a short verse that is half blessing and half boast. The boar's head is laid upon a bed of herbs, rosemary, bay, thyme, and its eyes, though inanimate, seem to hold the light. A tray of pies follows: meat pies glazed with egg, mince tarts smoked with candied peel, and a specially seasoned pork roast that will be carved at the center. There is an exchange about song selection, and the minstrel leads the hall in a rhyme that asks whether the meat is tastier for the Lord who gives or for the servant who has.
Cooked it. The music becomes a background wash. The sound of metal goblets clinking keeps time like a secondary drum. A child at the back of the hall hums along, and a woman near the doors lines up her spoon to catch a dribble of juice in a way the crowd tolerates with amusement. The sensory description is maximal here: sight of gilded plates and steam, the sound of laughter and low conversation, the scent of sage and sugar, the feel of a warm seat under a cloak, the taste of a sample cut off a skewer and softened in the mouth. In these moments, the hall is both theater and home. Power is displayed, but warmth is shared. Pause, if you will, as the tables are set and the servants have made their last rounds. If in this hour you feel the smell of bread in your nostrils, you are connected to the human core of what is happening. This story is as much about survival as about display. Pause by commenting, tell me in the comments which small thing you would miss most if you lived in this house without modern comforts. Start your reply with P, bread, V, candle, or K, kitchen. The comments weave a community, and they help decide what detail I will return to next. The room waits for you to answer and then carries on. The plates are aligned, the rush is fluffed, and the steward nods for the procession to begin. That small pause in the narrative makes space for you to feel the heat in your own hands. The banquet proper is a choreography of service and spectacle. Servers move like bees between tables. Their faces are flushed, brows sweating from the exertion of carrying heavy platters and keeping pace with the Lord's appetite. Dialogues in the hall increase in complexity and reach a necessary density. The Lord issues a compliment to the cook. "Rowan, that roast takes the cold from my bones." And Rowan bows, responding with a string of modesties and a quick technical admonition about overcooking the loin. Guests trade small confidences. Lord Heron speaks low with a visiting steward about boundaries of hunting rights. Lady Isolde tells a quiet joke to a neighbor about fashions that could provoke guffaws, and then a small conspiratorial exchange about a gift the Lord will present at the end. The jester, no longer merely a ring of comic relief, acts as a social engine, blowing off steam from the stern faces with a ribald jest that sets several people laughing at once. The music swells and ebbs in time with courses. Fingers press napkins to mouths, and in between bites, eyes search for recognition. There are several moments of tension during the feast that carry weight beyond the immediate. First, a miscounted portion threatens the dignity of a visiting knight. He receives a smaller cut of meat than expected, and a hush follows. Aldrich must decide whether to offer a second serving and risk seeming partial. He chooses to stand and announce that an extra board joint will be brought forward, his voice steady but his inner thoughts circling like a hawk. He remembers the ledger and a family debt, the memory of a prior slight that could fester into feud. He balances honor and pragmatism in a breath. The scene is pressed into 2 paragraphs where Aldrich's internal memory of a disputed dowry and the present duty intersect. His decision to give the second portion stops what could have become a longer quarrel and demonstrates how ceremony manages the edge of conflict. Second, a whisper of sickness moves through the servants' ranks. A girl named Etta has fallen faint in the buttery, and her pallor suggests fever. Tomas runs for cool cloths, and Master Cook Rowan sends the jester to fetch broth, while Marta steadies her. The fear is immediate, hands quick. The two-paragraph tension hangs heavy with self-reproach and fear. A memory of a past winter when several went without, and a decision to share rations now could make or break health in weeks. Third, a romantic strain. A young archer named Bjorn has eyes for Alice the laundress, but social shape keeps them apart. At the table, he spills ale and blushes when Alice laughs, and the jester teases them. This flirtation grows into a small confession later, requiring a choice to speak or maintain silence. Fourth, at the close of the feast, a small accusation is raised. A cup lessened in weight has been suspected of theft by a minor chamberlain. The accusation threatens to unravel the warm closure of the meal. It is resolved when Ansel produces the cup from a storeroom and admits he had moved it without thought. The moment is a litmus test of trust and accountability in the household. These tensions are not mere spectacle. Each one shows how a household negotiates its honor, its health, and its hearts. They unfold in quiet dialogues and interior recollections, the kind that add depth to an evening of cheer. The hall hears the hurt, the apology, the extant precision of the steward's memory, and the cook's quick compassion. After the meal, the night shifts. The jesting and singing give way to smaller circles of talk. In the twilight corner of the great room, minnesingers and minstrels sing of travel and home, and the jester tells an old story about a fox that wore boots. There is a game of Bean King. A bean baked into a small cake designates a temporary ruler who gives funny decrees. The game loosens social bonds. A lord might be compelled to dance by the edict of a servant made king for a moment. The game produces laughter and a rare inversion. Finn commands the steward to tell a joke, and Aldrich, usually a figure of formality, must attempt humor. The exchange extends with well-measured comic timing. "What do you call a knight who prays too loudly?" Finn asks. "A bell ringer," Aldrich replies clumsily, and is applauded. The humor dispels tension, allows small transgressions in a safe frame, and reaffirms the day's generosity. Later, night draws a veil, and the castle grows quieter. The chapel sees another small vigil. Brother Emrys and the priest keep a low watch, their voices a hush of chant that threads through corridors. The guard, Wulfric, and another named watchman, Osric, go their rounds, clanking armor muffled by wool, watching the outer gate. The jester, now quieter, slips behind a pillar and hums a tune that once comforted him as a child. There is a moment on the stair where the priest and the steward cross paths and share words that are not public. The steward confesses a fear about winter rations. The priest answers with a suggestion of prudence and prayer. This scene is intimate and reflective, a crisp, small moment where two roles meet with frankness that is rare in daylight. The night itself has a taste of cinder and melted fat, the smell of wood embers and lavender from the cleansed bed linens. Noise reduces to the soft hiss of embers and the far hurrah of the chapel bell, and in that hush, secrets slide forward and get stated, things that daylight would not hold. A vigil in the chapel that night feels like an arc toward the sacred. The acolytes whisper, "Stay watch." Brother Emrys touches the chalice and remembers a past Christmas when he had lost his younger brother to fever. The memory is in the small act. He fingers a worn stitch in his robe that he never mends. He thinks of the child's laugh and how a single small bed might have kept him warm. He holds the present in his hands as if it might mend the past, and in that reflection he finds the mercy he will speak of tomorrow. There is a brief musing about the source of the holiday's meaning. Ritual, yes, but more importantly, recognition of those who have less. The watchman pauses at the chapel steps to listen to a fox hunting in the dark below the wood. He hums a tune to keep his spirits. That night, a hushed exchange between the priest and Lady Isolde is simple and tender. She admits to fear about a child of a sister whose health has worn thin, and the priest takes her hand and gives a blessing, but more practically, he instructs a plan to send food and a few coins.
In this small functional kindness, you see how the church acted as both poet and practical agent of care. There are moments of private revelation that the night allows. Marta slips into the buttery and finds a small tin box beneath a beam. Inside rests a letter, brittle and forbidden, from a past lover of the steward. The discovery forces a decision, to hide or to reveal. She thinks of Aldrich's careful face in the hall, his ledger lined with obligations, his small brutalities in service to order, and she imagines the mess
a revelation would make. Silence becomes a kind of mercy, but silence can also be collusion. The scene unfolds in 2 paragraphs heavy with memory and internal negotiation. Marta remembers a winter when Aldrich's sternness had kept a child alive by sheer calculation. She balances the potential harm of revealing the letter against the pivoting kindness he had once extended to her family. She chooses to leave the letter in place and to whisper a caution to Master Cook Rowan instead, asking him to keep an eye on Aldrich's mood. That choice softens the household and upholds the complex web of loyalty and truth. At the stroke when the house finally sleeps, the embers make maps on the hearthstones and the rushes flatten. There is a cadence of finality, goblets rinsed, a last song hummed, a scraping of feet as the last of the servers returns to quarters. In the cold hush just before sleep, you can hear the castle's own slow breathing, the settling of beams, the dripping of thawing ice, the soft rumble of far animals moving in the yard. Scenes of small confessions settle like dust, songs hung like garland on the rafters. The day has folded into story. Morning follows with a practicalness that is almost tender. The cleaning is methodical, rushes swept up and saved, plates stacked and counted, the Lord's cloak brushed by Ansel and returned to the wardrobe. The distribution of morning gifts is formal and means more than coin. A small silvered bowl, a strip of cloth, a ringlet of preserved fruit, symbols of recognition that the household participated. The steward moves like a god of accounts and gestures to names on the list and who shall be given what. He watches faces for gratitude and for resentment. The master cook parcels remaining foods to the poor at the gate. There is a ritual to the quiet aftermath, and even in the low tasks, washing, mending, handing out measures, one finds dignity. The epilogue now folds time forward in shows of consequence. 1 month later, the garlands sag in corners, but the lessons of winter trade in practicalities. Bjorn, who had flirted with Alice, brings a woven basket of small bread loaves to her door and dares to pulp the space between them with a gentle joke. She answers with a shy grin, and they begin a slow exchange of favors, laundry in return for bread, small economies of heart. The steward Aldrich, chastened by the way he saw a visiting steward receive equal treatment, has altered a ledger. He petitions the Lord to allow an extra measure of grain to be held in reserve for the poor. The master cook Rowan has taught Tomas to hold a spoon steady, and Tomas now waits at the fire less startled. His hands have learned the pattern of steady turning. Brother Emrys visits the sick in a hamlet and brings not only prayers, but a bag of barley and a promise to check on the elder women. The household learned that generosity is cost, and that in the ledger of small actions, reputations change. Marta keeps a small scrap of fabric from the Lord's cloak as a token for her son, who will, in time, complain of a different climate and new tasks. The domestic fabric of life has adjusted to the season. People seem gentler and more practical, their conversations lilting toward plans for spring. 3 months on, work returns to a steadier hum, and stories have begun to crystallize into patterns. The jester's song about the boar becomes a local favorite, hummed by children who chase each other in the yard. A dispute over a boundary at the neighboring farm is mediated by the steward's modest offer of grain and a promise of labor. The dispute closes without edge. The priest's sermon on mercy has become a household phrase. Remember mercy is said half jesting at the table and half as instruction when the Lord asks for counsel. A small child born to a stable worker is christened by Brother Emrys, and the Lord grants a small cloak to the mother.
The gift will be a sign spoken of in the months to come as evidence of care. Thomas now stands at the spit almost like a man. He has been given a small knife and a new kind of dignity. The household's ledger shows a cautious optimism. There were losses and debts, yes, but people see themselves as part of a woven continuity rather than solely as individual claimants. 6 months later. Some customs have hardened into habit, others have loosened. The steward's ledger holds a note that he has altered the rules for plowshares, allowing small waifs to work for bread rather than coin, thus securing labor and goodwill. The boar's head ritual is repeated in memory at another table when the Lord's cousin visits. The cousin remarks on how the household has changed while the Lord smiles with the knowledge that performance and care can be one and the same. Marta herself has been promoted to a position in the service of Lady Isolde. She now supervises 2 younger women and finds she has a steadier sleep and more to teach. Alice and Bjorn are engaged in a slow negotiation of mutual aid. They have agreed on a dowry of sorts, a promise to care for one another's families when needed. Brother Emrys records in the parish book names of those who received aid in winter and adds a recommendation that record-keeping be kept more transparent. The consequences of a single day have braided into a new pattern. Some small tragedies had been avoided, some small hopes encouraged, and the house will continue to keep its rituals even when the original flames die down. Throughout all of this, the small technical details matter. The roasting of a boar requires trussing the legs and belly to a firm shape, driving a spit through hind and shoulder to secure rotation evenly, and basting at precise intervals. A blend of ale and honey to prevent excessive dryness while encouraging glaze. The mincing of spices demands that cinnamon be crushed first to release oils, clove be used sparingly to avoid bitterness, and ginger added near the end to preserve its bright heat. The bread ovens are stoked to a certain temperature, smoke cleared from the chamber, and a hand held near the bricks to test warmth before dough is introduced, and loaves must be turned once to avoid one side charring. These technical instructions, mere brushes in the larger portrait, give weight to the hands that labor. They are not guesswork, but craft. By the end, the lesson held in the long day is apparent. A festival is not only an exhibition of power, but a daily act of care made ceremonial so it can be shared. The feast allowed those with position to show generosity. It allowed those without to show craft. It allowed music and story to rearrange the gravity of social roles, even if only for an evening. The candles gutter, but the warmth they helped produce lingers in hands and in records. If this nighttime story moved you, if some small detail found a place in your memory, write below about which detail surprised you. Your comments shape which small corner of history I will pry open next. As the house closes around its ordinary tasks, the final thought fits like a well-made seal. The warmth the flames produced may cool, the garlands may dry, and the rushes be swept and stored, but the human heat, the decisions to spare, the jokes told to lighten burden, the chores that became kindness, remains an ember one can tend. 1 month, 3 months, 6 months later, the legacy of that single Christmas shows in loaves shared, in a ledger amended for mercy, in a lover's small basket, and in a stitch saved for another's child. If you liked this passage of time and place, consider subscribing for more quiet stories like this, small, researched, told close to the breath. Good night. May the fire you have in your life always find kindling.